I realized, being a human with a sieve like mine, particularly we're talking about aging, that I forgot two important things. I forgot there's a more emptiness read on the second wheel, the directional wheel it's sometimes called, of evolution on the left, sometimes white, and retrograde, or we'll call it dragon on the right.
The second wheel is the realms you're talking about?
No, the second wheel is usually looked over. The second wheel is often ignored. It's a directional wheel, and it has evolution on the left and retrograde on the right.
The little man?
Pardon? The little man,
Yeah.
up and down.
Yeah.
So, what I forgot to say is that there is an emptiness read on that, rather than saying up is up and down is down, which our more conventional read would be, which is there is a false positive and a false negative. Now, it seems that in this seminar we've been talking a lot about false positive in terms of like sexual predation among Buddhist leaders, and ego inflation, which pushes into the God realm. And that would be a false positive. Also, you might take your own notes. I like to have a diary with this group about when have you been caught in inflation of attainment, which actually needed to crash in order to open the next stage. Now, I don't know how many people know the story of the magical city in the Lotus Sutra. That is to the point about this, where Buddha arranges a kind of group hallucination of travelers on a desert going to a fabulous oasis with silk camps and camels and dancing girls and all kinds of bubbly water. And the seekers say, "Oh my God, we finally arrived, thank you so much, Master." And he said, "Oh no, this is all just an imaginal creation, we're leaving in the morning."
Gandharva, is that the one?
Yeah. And that was, he said, "I knew you were tired and I knew that you were developing negative ideas around your fatigue and goal setting, and so this is a respite." And this is to show you that all realms are created and uncreated at the same time. But it's a beautiful story. So the emptiness is is characterized by no fixed mark. All other dharmas have fixed marks or no fixed mark. Emptiness is characterized by no fixed mark. So when we do our vows as priests, we are vowing to not have a fixed personality, which is to make our basis the ground with ground or no fixed mark. So that tension between mark and no mark is in many ways the self and no self presentation. I just want to say what false negative, false positive, false negative is when we go down. There are often many treasures we find as we plunge into the sea with various things tied around our neck. Sometimes we won't open certain things unless we are disintegrated. There is a term out of the 50s of psychiatrists in Poland, positive disintegration. So maybe you could call up times when you have actually taken a dive that turned out to be a positive part of this turning of your own veil. The ego has no way of knowing false positive and false negative. It just doesn't. So there's where Prajna comes in. And there's where we go with process, rather than describing what is what and what is not, which is part of what is cured by the middle way. Okay, so false positive, false negative. The other thing is I left on the negative realms, there's the positive gods at 12 o'clock, 9 to 11 is the negative gods, characterized by armored deities in the heavens, with chariots throwing spears down to the poor human. Has to do with oppression. Now, for our purposes, since we're not in refugee camps, it would have to do with forces we are unaware of that are oppressing us. This takes a lot of practice because we don't see what we don't see. And we don't, our self-esteem usually doesn't like us to see that we're being subjugated, but certain kinds of pain, particularly in the body, will give the message. Some people get out of the suffering dilemma by simply holding on to suffering and have all sorts of ideations about being worthless and no good.
So can you explain how you get out of suffering by holding on to suffering?
Oh, well, you probably haven't gone through female masochism like I have.
It isn't my specialty.
It isn't your specialty.
Okay, but I've met
Well,
people now. I've talked to lots of people now. I really
Yeah, no, I had
I don't know that much about it, so please tell.
Okay, I was, as an adult with children, a non-speaking woman. There was no doubt about it. My mother was oppressed and marginalized and thought that she was a wonderful woman. She was a genius at seeing into the feeling states of other humans. I mean, she was didn't even know. So, but that wasn't in the culture of knowledge. So I just didn't speak because I thought I was quiet. Now, I could ACDC in different situations, but because I didn't know I was suppressing being able to think and express too until I became a Zen student. And then some of my friends were just sick of it. There was also beginning of women's movement, and they would knock it off.
They experienced it as a withholding.
Oh, well, the word pseudo-imbecile comes to mind. It's a psychiatric term. I love that term. So in Zen Center, I, for years, would sit in, the little alley outside the main Zen with the black velvet. And they'd say, Diane, what are you doing there? And I'd say, oh, they've devoted their lives to it, and I don't know if I'll ever get basically big enough to sit in the real Zendo, so I'll just sit here. And no. So I was, a lot of people were on me. So, but because of historical conditioning, because of reification and everything, and because I developed a mode, I didn't speak. I did start speaking when I started being a college English teacher, because that's part of the job. I squeaked by the interview with San Francisco State. I was there for 4 years, so that was helpful. But I also, at a certain point, you're very good at conflict, tension. And of course, resolution. You have to be in conflict in order to have the skill. So I was a fleer, and I would go down. I didn't know I was going down. I just thought, well, that person has a right to have an opinion, and I don't have much to say. And this did not help anyone.
No, it never moved. It stayed there.
So I should write a little thing. I was a former female master. And then you could be the other side.
I'll be happy.
I don't have any experience with a giant, but I'll help you out. Okay, so here's a
So you take on the identity as a way of dealing with the suffering. I mean, the suffering doesn't really go away, but you become that becomes your story.
Yeah. So this is the only the negative going around is the only one with 2 zones, because there's a cloud barrier and there are the warriors with their helmets and their chariots throwing the spears. And the humans are half naked with little supplicating hands. And this basically is sadomasochism, and I like to keep that term. All my students hate it if I zing on that part. I don't overdiagnose everybody in that way. I just say, pay a lot of attention to what people are afraid of. And also dominating forces. To get them to hear them as voices and as designers of their behavior and what feelings are allowed and not allowed. So, negative thoughts. Okay, in the realms, I forgot the hungry, wandering ghosts. Now that's a big one. That has a very contemporary feel. It's a special kind of hunger that has no fulfillment possible at all.
Which place on the clock?
It's 7 to 9. On the left side, people have little tiny throats, so they can't take much in. They have huge the painter monk screams, and they have extended bellies like starving by African children. The total presence, the signs of constant want. But either by design or circumstances, the ways of fulfillment never happen. Okay, the other thing is wandering. There is no sense of home, either inside or out. There's often a kind of dishevelment and turning everything upside down as the members of that part takes over as members of the community. Some tendency to be a naysayer. This home is not good enough. I would be one of you, but your home isn't the home for me in Buddhist-wise. It's not good. But rather that they have a problem with settling and they have a problem with the love aspect of loyalty.
Is this the addicts realm here?
This is, it is addicts. There is an intoxication on 11 o'clock on the outer wheel on the links, which is a man and woman geisha house. It does correlate. The ghost-like is feeling unreal and unsubstantial. Not in the positive sense of taking the nuggets of over-concretization out of one's practice and one's mind habits, but actually not feeling like a human being, feeling that other people must be in some club of realness that they're not in. You know, it's a really horrific thing. So, feelings of having nothing inside to give. So Buddhism scares us when if we're in that one of those. It scares people who may like or been forced to by circumstances. Because there's an avoidance of death. Okay. And because of the feelings of emptiness somehow gets to be an enemy. There's, you know, the word is perhaps violation in our talk, because I don't like the word we translate emptiness in our culture, empty cold. But, okay, so those are choices. So let's just go, as James is coming in, we'll just go through, we went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're up to the 6 senses, one being the turning mind. So we started out with
from the outer wheel.
From the outer wheel. These are the 12 lengths of conditioned becoming. And Shakyamuni pointed this wheel after he got people to paint it, and he said, this is my first definition of emptiness. So that's how causation and emptiness came together, was in this outer wheel. And it is a moment by moment arising practice. Cannot be done any other way, except there's a lot of practical flat-footedness in terms of memorizing the part. Just like you were getting a musical instrument. You wouldn't try the chords until you had some notes, until you had your hands agreed to play, and all kinds of things like that. And then you practice set, and then you can do freely being connected to both hands and then being separate at the same time. So one has to memorize. I had made 2 points about that the visual is more sophisticated than the words. This was the main deep learning in this culture was imagistic thinking. So on number 4, which is the 2 men in a boat, there's actually 3 visually. And that is very important because that's the intentional figure. It's the steersman who directs where the body and mind are going, keeps them all in one boat. Most religions separate mind and body, and that's our one Seneca heresy, is we do not separate. Although we, of course, as people do it all the time, be aware that he's aware of shallow and depth. He has a pole that can get him out of trouble. And so he is, he's the most, besides the boat itself, he's the most important container for the passenger. That isn't, you don't get that wrong sense with Namarupa is just the passenger's not the main one. In the 6 senses, the averting door is tremendously important. It's the first time the mind takes over and organizes sensory.
Is that like at 8 o'clock or something?
Yeah,
or are we still
yeah,
on the
you're
boat?
right. Yeah, it's 8 o'clock.
After the boat.
It is considered a sense registry after the boat. And think of advert, turning. And if we learn to be on the threshold of the turning mind, believe me, things change. Because we know what we're letting in and what we're shutting out. So it helps a lot with attachment aversion.
And is that the house?
Yeah,
It's the house.
Which picture?
The door.
The house.
Okay. Usually people jump over that and they say, well, give me the Buddhist sense of the mind, like the Yogacara list of the 8 minds. They forget about, but this is the first one that Shakyamuni gives you. It's right there at the scene of construction. Okay, the next one is contact, inner and outer. Now there's terrific scientific evidence now about early infancy that in terms of contact, textures, and all kinds of things that we need to know about that. But we also need to know that we have a bank of stored experiences and memories that are highly gestalted, that if we get a trigger from the outside, we will blow off. I mean, something will happen inside or something, we'll have an energy drop.
Will you say that again?
Okay. We think of contact because we're Western materials, we think of it on the outside, even some of the child. But we forget that we have, in the Alaya, our own setup of gestalted and wholesome and unwholesome seeds that we're unaware of.
When you say gestalted, they've merged into
Well,
single experience.
They're into universal the universal vast aspect of seeds, but we also put some forward and some back. Freud was very good at saying, "No, wait a minute. We're taking the ones that are hidden and we're putting them on the table, and then we've got two halves of something." So we are triggered easily, and I think because we're priests, we don't like to think ourselves as so triggered as we are. So we have to encourage each other to get down there. We talk to each other about these arrangements we have in ourselves. One of the main freedom roads in this is pattern recognition and to go inside. So if you're thinking about contact, think of what triggers and contacts parts of me and what arises them. Now, we are often surprised that one thing scares us. We're not going to talk about it because, oh, this scares me. Goes down, merges with it.
Well, that was Marianne's talk. All of the
yeah.
interior gestalt experience of what she was longing for came out in mysterious and not helpful ways.
That was really excellent because you had the courage to go there and you stayed. You were very eager in your staying. I'm sure it was painful to put the top together.
Yeah, but no, that the evenness is there. That's what allows it to work.
Because of what?
The evenness is there, and that's what allows
yes,
it to work.
that I was talking when I did a little feedback about the equality of the dharmas. And then you even talked about your beloved teacher, which is courageous. Therefore, we could figure out, in our swift little human minds, we could figure out some interchanges that you guys might have. Okay. All right, contact. Feeling. Maybe this wheel is negative until it's positive, which is positivistic familiar with the arm. Don't want that. Negative. It's bound until unbound. The picture is in our wheel. The guy forgot to paint the shaft of the arrow, but it's an arrow coming directly into the eye. It is negative feeling.
Where's this?
It's 9 o'clock.
Yes.
No.
He's got an arrow in his eyeball?
Contact 10 o'clock. It's 10 o'clock. The man has his hands raised.
Uh-huh.
There should be a
As if
shaft.
he's shooting an arrow.
Shooting the arrow.
Uh-huh.
Now, in our practice, we are trained to not always be obsessed with who shot the arrow at me. In other words, we get into non-dualistic place with it. And that's very important. I mean, it isn't, if there's scandalous issues of humans, then we would say that. But just as a general practice, you want to get just broader about the whole arrow thing in the eye. Now, it's important, it's not the leg, it is the vision. We cannot see in the face of, in that atmosphere.
So we have to acknowledge that we were hit, but don't put the projection on the one who shot it.
No, unless it's
necessary.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So a pain diary of this kind is very helpful. This is a portraiture that, that's one of the beauties of the wheel, is that there's a human portraiture every step of the way.
Did you describe the pain diary?
Oh, yeah. It's, instead of saying, I lived here, I have this many siblings, I'm this gender, I'm quiet or not loud, or loud or not quiet, or on this preference list, if you like, and which is or isn't accurate when you get to that point. That you actually go through each part and you say, where do I experience the arrow in my eye? Just like coins, you get in the field that the coin that Will is talking about me. So we have our distancing tricks. So then you keep at it. You make a list, and you know the first one is like, and then finally it comes up, and then we're through. We immediately split, dualistic splitting, okay. But we let it cook. We go back to it. We keep going back. We let the mind be soft and blank, because that's how creativity arises. It doesn't arise with a ready cat or a set idea. So we allow the space for the arising, and then we care about it. We say, all this suffering, I've never thought, okay, should I document to myself personal pain as an arrival of a kind of self? Then we get into identity making, which of course we're all concerned with. Okay, so there are layers of it. Those two layers I think are the most important.
So particularly repetitive patterns
Yep.
where we feel hurt, we start to see that, and
Mhm.
we see where our involvement is.
Yep.
And how we created a self,
So-
and then what it does under those
So that would
circumstances.
probably be the third. There would be instances that would come up later. If you allow spaciousness for one layer and you practice holy waiting, you will get many more. So, and then if
You say third, I'm not sure
again,
which third.
what she's just talking
Third
about.
on the wheel?
On the
third?
wheel, third.
Well, the aspect of repetition compulsion to repeat, and from that we should be able to see patterning. Now, often other people tell us about our patterning. Or we have ways of moments of brightness, oh, I see this, why didn't I see it before? And then, I mean, we are fast energizer bunnies that way. So we have to be aware, if we're going to do pattern recognition, we have to be aware of splitting off. Most everything, truth-wise, occurs in dyadic oneness, in the way Buddhism is laid down.
Dyadic oneness,
Yeah.
being not two, not one.
Yeah.
The dialogue.
Right. So we, okay, now we're down to pattern
Yeah,
recognition, and then we're into
I just
recognition
have a
splitting
question.
off.
When you talk about pattern recognition, you're talking about both within each link and also the way that the
Yep.
whole thing moves?
Yes. I would suggest doing separate Nadanas
Just one
links
piece at a
and
time.
realms first.
Uh-huh.
Even if you say, wow, this is about interpenetration, and you want to get in it. So tomorrow, we're going to do some interpenetration. I'm going to let you guys give me some reports. You can work in dyads. But tomorrow, I'd like you to pick a realm and a link and tell me what happens with you about that. So, but right now, we're doing singular, like musical chords and musical notes. Okay, so negative feeling, contact before negative feeling, intoxication and craving. It's the man or woman negation house. This is the beginning of a big triptych from 10.
That's 11, is that 11?
That's 11.
11 o'clock, I mean?
Yeah. There is a triptych at the top that is craving, and then grasping, and then becoming. Well worth learning that chord. Just like the importance of primary ignorance, internal habit formations down at the bottom, and consciousness, how that works, there's a top triptych. Those two are the most important. Okay, so craving meant to Buddha differently than we have it, actually, I would say. I have this thing about in cultural transmission, a lot is lopped off, particularly the dyadic aspect is not there. But it's craving for being and non-being. Notice that you don't hear so much the non-being. You see, craving for being. And of course our culture, happily so, is more interested in substance use and addictions of all kinds. But as Buddhists, we want to know craving for being and non-being. I would suggest going for the being because it's more invisible, harder to spot. By nature, our being sense is not in our non-being, right? It's like backwards, it's out.
So could you give an example of craving for being? And
Annihilation fantasies.
That's craving for being?
Non-being, sorry,
Okay,
non-being.
so we'll-
Being is just wanting to be big and powerful, would be one wanting to fuse with other women, often fuse with other people in order to have a self that's made of two people. Wanting to...
Wanting to be safe, that's...
Safety is how safe, right. Then there's the whole thing of clinging to the setup from childhood, whether it's our own reactivity or the way the conditions were, and just going pell-mell into the future. Projection goes from the past, shoots through the present, goes into the future, and then pulls back to the present. There's a double whammy in the present.
So, as you said, craving for non-being is annihilation, not being seen or heard, for example.
And some destructive non-beingness is very tricky to spot. Like in all those teaching stories about people that burn their books, that were caught in the being of being traveling scholars and having their expertise, although in
They
the
swing to the other
you do train to have expertise. But it's over-literalization. Boy, if our culture isn't over-literalized, I don't know what it is. So, yeah.
How about in terms of meditation, when sometimes there's a misunderstanding and there's a tendency to try to derail thought?
Oh, yeah.
And that's why we have the three states thinking, non-thinking, and beyond thinking.
Right, Dogen's a cure for that. Notice he doesn't take the word thinking out. He says non and not, and he was asked several times and he held. But we conceptually we can't do that. And we can only resolve it by practice. But that's talked about a lot about the wholesale throwing out of thinking, or the gratification and the elevation that occurs. So we have people say, oh, I went through the first day of sesshin, I didn't think one thought. Let's see, Marcia, could you come over here? We have a new person and we need a little shikantaza work here. So we actually get on that right away. I was dumb about looking into and testing shikantaza in people. I assumed that because the training was there, that everyone was doing shikantaza, and then like 20 years into it or something, I started asking some questions. I was horrified at my own remiss too. But
So what did the students say that horrified you? I don't think, or
I've
been sitting with this for
20
years,
years,
never had
any thoughts.
No, yeah, the non-thinking, the squishing of which is repression of humans, of course, and not. Dogen was saving thinking, you know, but and saw it also as self-ethic. But there are people who come in and they would say, you know that that cascading waterfall I had that was all sparkly and wonderful that I had when my dog died and you did the funeral for my dog, and isn't that wonderful? I can't get it back. I tried and tried and tried to get it back, and I'm just exhausted because I can't get it back.
They want it back in Zazen?
They want it back in Zazen, yeah, because that was such a perfect
beautiful
state,
place to be.
preferred state psychology is what I call it, which is it's an addictive thing.
Is listening out kind of.
Listening out is it,
Yeah,
right?
it's,
You know.
the other thing that I've heard people say is I've been meditating for 30 years and I thought just meant daydream. I mean, letting my mind go.
Yeah, right.
That's another horror.
That's another one. That's a
Shikantaza.
soft horror. Yeah. You're not going for a gravity thing.
There's no dynamism there. There's
Yeah,
no
no,
energy.
no.
It's just the mind.
Good point. Denial of conflict as the way the human being is.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think, that really needs to be worked with. Is what it is. Oh, conflict. I'm not a good person. I will try to bring harmony to everyone because that's what the Pullman ceremony says. And if I spot it in myself, I have the ways of doing that. The dualisms are part of non-duality. You can't like break up the family. You know, in that way. Okay.
Make it stop. Make it go
The
away.
stop thing, yeah. Well, if you do repressive stopping, you cannot use end stopping from the Chan point of view, actually. Stopping and seeing. And you're not going to do that. So a lot of these are, you know, what the word near enemy is called.
Mm-hmm.
It means you think you're doing a virtue when it's a bastardization or a real reversal, actually. And of course, it comes to and it causes a lot of depression among people. And
It causes depression because there's a kind
well, nothing happens, nothing.
There's nothing happening,
Like
and there's
that.
also, and then it's pushing down
It's
the
like
energy.
a cloud cover in San Francisco Bay in summer. I forgot that summer was not summer here. Oh, I didn't bring the right things. We were at 105, so yes. Okay, we're up to grasping monkey mind.
Would going back to non-being for a second, would suicide be an
Oh, yeah,
example
suicide.
of
You're screwed now.
desire?
Longing for non-being.
Longing for non-being. Now,
So that's what it's people
I had a student that was, my husband and I spotted this at the same moment in time. They were talking along and they were convivial and smart and deep and everything and scintillating, and then they said, but you know, I could kill myself at any moment. And then now let's look at this vase over here. It's really beautiful. And I was like this, my husband caught it. I said, was that what I thought it was? He said, absolutely, I caught it too. So I had to change my mode. Because I hadn't caught it before that. And I think if the teacher doesn't catch things, if things are working, they will come up and get more manifest. They should. If you're in repressive systems where that's the trouble with the overlord kind of I, me, and my type of Buddhist leader, is that you will not get compensatory arisings that don't like the scene here and will come up elsewhere. You don't get that. Thing is, the containment by one person is so large that the pressures for adaptation are so rewarded.
Yeah,
punishments.
so the overbearing and the need to measure up
Yeah,
does
yeah.
not allow the individual arising of.
Yeah, not all the
to be
years
seen.
writing. That would be institutional sin number 101, I think. That predation. Okay, oh wait. Grasping mind. Again, the visual is much, the living visual, I make these videos in my mind, the movie quality. The monkey is going across the canopy of the jungle and grabbing a fruit. Now, that's a single moment. What he's really doing is taking a bite of banana, seeing something else, throwing the banana down and going for the next one, taking a bite, seeing something else, throwing it down. It's constant dualistic splitting. That's what grasping is. It's not just this. Often it's not just this. It's like that. If you had a video, you would see it. So we have to enliven our own interiorities, because our interiorities are in little tiny boxes. They often fight with each other, and they usually push one off in oblivion. Dogen said, when one thing is illumined, another thing is in the dark, and later he said it's pushed into the void. It does not exist. So, two ways of experiencing grasping and monkey mind. Not just the hopping around, but the hopping and throwing, hopping and throwing. Nothing is suggestive. Nothing is metabolized.
Which adds to the continuous quality of it, because you never rest anywhere
You have to go
or
faster.
anything. So you're constantly.
You have to increase the grasping and throwing. You say, oh, someone should say, I think I'll let this go. I'll do this. And then sometimes we're giving away so much that we just take tiny little bites of things. I mean, everything gets worse.
Is a computer use like a perfect reinforcement of that activity? Viscerally in the body, actually.
Well, the body goes crazy because it doesn't get nourishment. So our feeling body and our mind body, our memory banks fragmented. So there is reactivity. Myself, I've studied somaticizing, because women, for one thing, somaticize more than men. And
Somaticizing,
yeah, putting tensions in the body that are unwanted, or not even holding up the burden of having a consciousness as a human. Yeah, trying to get rid of it rather than holding it with some reverence. And so I was almost flat on my back. I was 14 hours a day, 2 years ago. And they couldn't cure me of pneumonia, which now can kill you. I had, what's it called? I had shingles. I had shingles, boils all over my face, and then it went to my optic nerve and my brain, and then they were really worried because I couldn't cry. Then they had to take my arthritis medicine away. Then I had the asthma and the pneumonia got going. So I was a mess, and I spent a lot of time like this. So I said, okay, Diane, this is a time of accounting. I mean, that was good anyway. So I had to go to Mexico because first I had to breathe before I did anything else. That was helpful. My husband and I went. But I have done a lot of searching of that. And I have female students who, when they come to the Hermitage, I didn't see this when they were at the center, they bring a big duffel bag full of drugs. But have you ever seen that with somebody? It's horrifying. I mean, this big.
They see my big bag of supplements, but they don't see.
No, actually, drugs. Yeah.
You're talking about
Now, not
prescription drugs.
Prescription drugs. Yeah.
Just that.
Same thing. I mean, heavy things. So, and then there's that issue of malpractice. My mother, I went to see her in Seattle once. Something was wrong with her. I went and I looked in the bathroom. There were 17 vials of drugs, and she had never taken a drug in her life. I said, Mother, what is this? Well, the doctors gave them to me. She was actually depressed, but they gave her everything. I made an appointment with the head of the medical college at the University of Washington. He said, Mrs. Bell, where is your list of drugs? She said, you must be psychotic. And he said, what should I do? And she gave him a number. He called him up and got him on the phone. And this is so good for my mother because she was so authority bound. Two authority figures screaming at each other on the phone about her health. It really freed her. Okay. So, grasping and dropping. Grasping and splitting off. Happens faster than a speeding bullet. Think of Superman catches the bullet. We're supposed to catch the bullet. We are trained to catch the bullet. Okay.
Are we still at the top?
Yeah, okay, next one is becoming. Man, woman, and embrace. Sometimes this is the streams of becoming, but craving for being or non-being, grasping and splitting off, and the streams of becoming or becoming, the fusion of becoming. Then we are creating a person. We're creating an identity. This happens like faster under 1 second, of course, all this. And it happens under awareness. That's where Prajna comes in. That's where she can try to come in. That leads to number 11, which is a birth scene, the birth of the self. Now there are 2 ways to do this. One is reincarnation. The Tibetans have taken literal reincarnation, which Buddha preached against. Mahayana sees it as momentary rising. So if you get good at this, you can say, what have I birthed as a self this moment? And you can go back, what is my grasping and throwing away, dropping off? What are my cravings for being a non-being? See how the triptych is
Oh,
right. Or in consciousness, you can say, what are the internal backwards? Consciousness is dependent upon habit formation, internal formation is dependent on primary ignorance. And then you go, it gives rise to, and it's dependent on. I would suggest you go and practice the backwards. Because we're taught to be a little choo-choo trained in the way we learn in school, and the way our cognitive functions work in a little line. So to go backwards and see what the conditions of arising is, of course, our faith. Okay. Old age to death, decay, the man with the corpse on the back.
What's that?
What? Man with the corpse on the back.
that's old age.
That's on number 330. So, you want to know, you want to ask yourself a personal question. What is the corpse on my back? If you can't think of something right now, think of a year ago, and if you can't think of that, think of 5 or 10 years ago. Sometimes we see more clearly historically.
What do you mean?
Old stuff?
It's death. It's a corpse. So we know it's death. We know it's dead stuff. And of course it's mortality in that sense. I mean, we are taught as Buddhists to always have, because of impermanence and because of his exquisite understanding of what the life cycle was about. But what is the burden that we don't know? It's a specific burden, but what if it is? We just think, oh, I'm tired and I'm exhausted. And we don't think, oh, my internal formations are like in my backpack and they're unusable and they had their day and what I can't throw them out. We don't think that way, but we should.
Diane, could there be like protections that we might have needed when we were little, but that we don't realize we don't need them anymore?
No, we don't realize because they become completely integrated as self. There is a cellular osmosis that occurs over time. Defenses become self. And there's a telescoping of time.
So when we look at the wheel, now we've gone through all of them from yesterday. And the one we started with yesterday, on this sheet, piercing the curtain of ignorance, is the blind man walking towards the water.
That's it. And that is in all the other 11.
The blind man.
Yeah, you always want to ask the questions about my primary ignorance present now when you work each of the other 11. You have to keep that up. So, by the way, one thing about old age and death and the man carrying the corpse is, I call it that our psychic arteries get geriatric with time. And that's, of course, the invitation to freshness in Zen. But try to think of what parts of us are defensive and had their day. They might have really worked. The ones that worked are idealized and become part of everything. It also is the way we see things. If you're in danger and need protection, you're looking for the outer world for who the predators are. You know, it might be a friend, it might be a spouse. It's like someone's a little different. It's a very active thing. So what is geriatric? We've talked about aging, but there is the aspect of inner geriatrics that I use. Okay, anyone else?
The inner geriatrics being that it's become rigidified, and so automatic. That's very hard for us to even know it's there.
They're known as delusional. it produces a nugget of a self, I call it, and it's in league with Yama, who holds the wheel, the Fang and Chi. When I work with people individually in the wheel, they drop the Yama really quickly. And they'll get very professional about this. I say, where's Yama here? He's like, that's in everything. Where's your feeling about seduction? You're being seduced, you're being tricked. So then there's some interest at that point. But don't drop the Yama. And issues like you talked about, the death aspect, the non-clinging, non-being, the wearing the weight that we don't know about its behind. All that has is fodder and legions of Yamas Lord Death Zone.
Did you say the invitation to freshness and Zen
Yeah.
is the...
I would say so, yeah. So,
Can I go back to
I
what
use
you
the word
said?
trickery all the
You
time.
should know your basic ignorance, so in all the, so that's sort of like where I go.
There's the personalization, where I go to be ignorant. We don't think it says it's actively seeking the place of ignorance. Of course we do. This is much more active than uneducated or just,
What am
oh,
I
yeah, I didn't
ignoring?
know
What
that.
am I ignoring here?
So I had to think, if people are coming in with stories about chicken trousers or weren't chicken trousers at all, I said, where have I been? Or what was I doing that I didn't do that, which is so primary? Well, that maybe is why I spent 14 hours a day in bed.
I think this is a very important translation of something that I teach to my students, which is always look for your part in this first. And you're saying your specific part is the deadness of your mind, or the ignorance of your mind, and covering up.
Yeah, that should
Something
be
that's
first.
very primary. Always look for your part in the foolishness when you're in conflict with someone first, and resolve or come to terms with that before you try to resolve. what
And
just
then
happened.
look for your part underneath any of the other links that you see into an end combination. These are quickly gestalted in groupings. You know. So, yes, that's the other thing that falls out is the fact that ignorance is under everything.
Yes.
And the thing that this is in a bound killer realm.
Yeah, the
And
killer,
it's true of humans.
the killer realm being self-centeredness. This is my
That's our
world.
world.
Don't fuck with it. This is my world.
Now,
I've written a book about my world.
because we have other things going on, like identifying ourselves as pacifists and being good people, that's why I'm against really over-confined training situations, because the adaptation self takes over. But also the contraction becomes idealized.
You're going to have to unpack the
Yeah.
contraction
Yeah.
becomes idealized.
Oh, okay, well, we speak as, in those systems, there's certain language that's used towards the teacher.
And the systems you're talking about are very strict,
You get love and you don't get-
residential settings.
You talked about a need for love and the fear of rejection, and that was right in there. In fact, boom, okay, there was another layer that went in there. So, and the denial of individuality, as if the flower is not about individual people. I mean, it wasn't the Chakra when he became, of course he was enlightened many times, but the final one, and he said, y'all come all, he said everyone has the residential Bodhi completeness. But it isn't that the 5 other people that the ascetics he wandered with came and they said, oh, we're so happy because we're all in it with you. It wasn't like that. The individual bodhisattvas and Buddhas are on the full lotus, as they are, in that sense. There should be a distinction between residential full enlightenment state in humans and what individuals have to go through. But there's a flattening out of that in refining monastic practice.
So what we have then in your model is that someone at the top is in a residential Buddha position,
Mm-hmm.
and the bodhisattva unfolding of all the individuals participating is underknown, it's not
Under the
evaluated,
umbrella.
but it's not seen and it's not
Not seen.
taken into
It's sort
account.
of, and is this a good time? Did I miss the part about codependent origination?
No, the whole thing is codependent origination because every link becomes a condition for the next arising. And every arising is dependent on what when the core first arising. So you get
Yes.
is arising and is dependent upon.
But
Two
in
very-
I guess like maybe in relationship with the people in the community, I'm trying to point to that.
Well, we try to keep the tension between individual training, ways of training. I have very different ways of training people, and since people aren't substantial people, I have different ways of treating them at different stages. Almost could be
Yeah.
reversals. So I pay a lot of attention to that. I probably had to work more on being an authority figure than I did being on even ground and being able to be at one with people, what was happening to people. That was my nature more, and I had a training in it. So I was lousy at certain leadership, particularly when people hadn't been trained enough to take over. Now they are. But I don't do services, and we have 2 transmitted people, and the priests are wonderful. And there's hardly anything I do except give dopes on all day and come to the sessions and do the practice days. And I have 2 groups, and I go to both of them. But I supervise everyone, and I am all the priests' teachers. So that is what I had to learn. I didn't have sufficient power as a cutting through master. I admired it from afar, but boy, that's not me. Well, you can't get away with that. This me and not me, so that's, that can't happen. So,
So you're talking about integrating horizontal and vertical.
right?
So that there is a teacher and teaching position, but the individual development of all the parts is a very important way that Sangha
Yes,
expresses
right.
itself.
Now, you could say there are other ways of thinking of oneness. When people are caught in certain things, there's often more sameness in what they're caught in than there is difference as universal. As people, you can see how that would work. So some of our priests now, who've hated each other for years, really broke my heart. We're really hardworking, profound, and devoted priests, but they hated each other. We had 2 hate pods. One national, one local. But they now can, for all the time, share dreams, and they say, hey, we have the same dynamics. They came to it at the same time when they developed, and now they're very close. So that's one way to get together, is to see beyond just the skin bag, but to see what Buddha saw as things that went into being, that was outside just the I, me, and myself clinging and the ignorance.
It seems like in your hate pods, they were enacting unconsciously all of these manifestations. And once they came to understand them, they saw they were enacting the same patterns. Yeah.
It was very heavy though. We had one Eno that it was certainly her time to be Eno, and we had to I stopped it after a couple months. She was either enraged or weeping in the car. I didn't realize. Someone said, do you know that Sally's in the car weeping? What? So I took it out there and I said, you're in the car weeping. But I couldn't work with it. It was not possible to stop it then. So we just, instead of saying, oh, you failed with me, it isn't for you now. You do so much for us, it's true, that you don't need to do now. And that actually worked. But when she was in that state, believe me, all the metal filings of everyone's complexes just came up at her. There was a volunteering part about the flower sticking. These are metal pieces on daggers. So, yeah, that now has become a productive process. But then it was happening, whoa.
When it was cloaked in the ignorance.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the key.
Of course, the non-dualistic teaching of the transformation through the negative, which I respect, but sometimes it's overdone. My husband was enraged when one of the priests came 10 years ago. He had a terrible stroke and was in a wheelchair for a couple of years. He couldn't talk or speak now. He with tremendous training couldn't walk, but he has no arm, and he was a sculptor, so had some cognitive damage. But somebody, when he just got out of being in the hospital for months, somebody told me, isn't it wonderful? You can now be a wisdom figure, Tom, because you've had this terrible catastrophe that's ruined your life. Isn't that great? He said, holy shit, we leave my house. I mean, my husband talks like that. So, and he has never seen that person again. But that was overdone, and it wasn't true because it didn't convene with the situation.
Well,
It
Tom would have to
really
get
kept
there
crashing.
first. He would have to be the one to say what had come of that.
He did, finally.
Yeah, but not
not
then.
the heartbeat.
Yeah,
So-
not then, yeah.
And then they argued about it. I mean, the person just wouldn't back up because they were so sure that they were carrying the Buddhist truth. And then he was the unknower, right? That
What
was.
a split. He went instantly from being the wisdom person to the unknower in
Yeah.
that person's mind.
Yes, that you have to have the other side of it. If you're going to project identify field, you've got to pick. If you're a victim, you got to pick out predators. If you're gone through preacher and you're elevated and you're in a problem, then you have got to pick. You've got to show someone that they don't know anything, but someday they will because you're telling them right there, the beginning.
So he took the projection, and the person who said this to you, like your Tom, took the projection of wisdom. He was actually being the wise man.
I think that
And projected
that
on
was
your
the right
husband. When your
thing to do.
husband did not accept the
No.
projection, then the unknowing side came to the fore.
Yeah, no, I completely supported him. The person jumped backwards like a spider. I mean, it was visceral.
Yeah, well, it's a lesson for all of us about how this sort of false cheeriness about suffering really sucks.
Yeah, it does.
So we should not bring that forth. If someone else who's actually suffering brings it forth,
Yeah,
that's a
that's
very
right.
different
That's right.
matter.
That's right.
But it shouldn't be what we come forward.
Right. And will sadism ever die? I mean, that's the other thing. Sadism is much bigger than we think. Comes out in all kinds of camouflage and.
Right, I'm
misplaced
so glad the
and
stroke didn't happen to me.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
That might have been a better thing to say.
Yeah.
Which was what he was no doubt feeling, which is,
Or-
I'm glad you get to be the wise one here.
I feel a little creepy about it, but I'm glad it didn't happen to me. That would have been.
That would have been more to the point.
You have the great teaching of creepiness. They're just, you talk about, this is creepy, that's creepy. I really like that.
But he's so afraid of the illness that he had to jump over it.
Yeah.
Not acknowledging it, but jump
The
past it.
vulnerability.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Wow.
Or fix it itself.
Right, but not actually.
Detoxify it.
Not actually be with it.
Yeah,
Not
there's no
actually-
being
To take it in.
I can really relate to this because as a breast cancer survivor, I remember having those kind of experiences. And when I first got it, there was a book called The Benefits of Illness.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, you take the benefits of
You
illness.
can.
You can have
awareness.
them. Yeah, you can have them.
Is that Susan Sontag?
It's actually, no, it's not, but it was actually a very good book once I got past that. But, and there are benefits, of course, but, you do have to discover them.
Yourself.
Yourself, yeah.
And this is, go ahead.
Well, there's a world of difference between having a book sitting there that you can pick up or set down as you want, and having some friend come
Very,
in
that's
and
very
put
true.
their stuff on.
Right, it's so distancing, it's so rejecting of the reality of what.
There's a crushing
what you're
feeling that
experiencing.
occurs.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
this is a real curse of the New Age movement,
Oh, boy.
which is the other side of it, which is if you were really clear, you wouldn't have had a stroke, you wouldn't have cancer, if you were.
We heard that.
Yeah, all that crap that comes with the denial of aging and sickness.
Yeah. No, blame the victim, it's called.
Yeah, but it's disguised. It's very disguised.
Spirituality.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's disguised.
If you follow my system, you'll get rid of all this stuff.
I had
Yeah.
a friend who was monk, and somebody came up and said, so, what were you thinking that caused you to be monk?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I want to be mugged. You don't look like the type that wants to be mugged.
And then there's a lot of literature about, like Louise Hay with, these list of cancers, what's wrong with you that you have that particular cancer?
Yeah, that's phrenology. It went up in 1910. Where rapists have big earlobes? Yeah, they had charts. Rapists have big earlobes.
Oh, so that's the organ we need to remove.
My husband has enormous Dumbo ears.
Oh my God. And it's a way that we can't personally accept our own deterioration. So we have all these systems in place to make them stop.
And why would one be foolish enough to look for something that's hard to see if you were on the road to perfection? I mean, you know, why bother? All these deals are being made at the edge of between consciousness and life, and we don't see the play. Just like when we're watching a play, we see what the lighting is in the circle. All these characters are standing around, all this furniture and new scenes are standing around, and then they darken it all and they shift it. Eventually, by the third act, the audience knows more than the hero or heroine, because they have expanded their view into darkness, and they know the this.
I talk about that in one of Hitchcock's terms, the MacGuffin. We all have these MacGuffins that we don't know about, whether it's Maltese Falcon or the radioactive sand in Notorious. The audience, the omniscient self, knows about this. They're in the person who's experiencing it. And so this is how Hitchcock talks about the MacGuffin.
Very nice.
As a MacGuffin.
Look at that thing.
In every plot of Hitchcock, there's a MacGuffin.
Oh my God, maybe I'll take that as an addition.
To your wheel.
If you get into the wheel, I suggest you make a fresh wheel for yourself. Make some rounds. Use the mandala. This is, of course, a very deep form. The mandala is simultaneously presented. That's its benefit. Unless language goes on, you keep dropping off and reaching for the future in that sense. This is simultaneous. So make 12 links, make 6 rounds, like pizza pie. If it gets busy, you just make several, and you look at them all. You have your own sense of what greed, hate, illusion. You might have different animals or other symbols. What is evolution for you, and what is de-evolution, what is regression, and what is false ascent and profitable descent? Just start making them. You have to have a kind of comportment of skill with the basics, but you can do it. It's constantly making the portrait.
It reminds me of a Christian practice called the examine. The examine that you do, you address a set of questions every day, every single day, very briefly. And so over time you see,
That's a
pattern
good
and development.
You know, there is a state between sleeping and waking. It's called a hypnagogic state, which is a big old fancy word, but it means it's a liminal state. Who mentioned liminality? You mentioned liminality, didn't you? Yeah. It's a liminal state. It's basically swirling oceanic. It's a chaos state, but it also puts up certain images from the alaya. And if you can hold 3 seconds in that, it will change your life as a practice. Because we wake up and then we're in an alarm clock world, ego world, responsibility world, defense and getting started. We're in all that like that. So if you can let things arrive, they're actually from the bigger system of the alaya, and from that get a sense of what we do examine. What is this image, mysterious image you have no relationship with, no reference system, don't even ask for a reference system, just say it keeps coming.
And the suggestion is to wake up and do this.
Yeah, well, wake up, then that's,
wake up and,
okay, what denomination does that?
Catholic.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
And not everybody did it.
Okay, we'll talk later.
I think maybe this will fit. From a Catholic priest who had studied Praga. Is that right? Praga? Journaling technique.
Yeah,
and I went to this workshop. It's sort of against my. I don't have a journal. And anyway, it was what he did. This technique allowed everyone in the room to enter this kind of liminal space and then write a diary. And he had suggested themes. And so it had nothing to do with belief or Catholicism at all, but the technique of that diary system and his skill, which he had been trained to do in this Frogov method. It was phenomenal because it allowed, he knew, they were almost hypnotic maybe, I don't know the technique, but he was very skillful in that. And there were probably 12 of us in the room, and we sat there with our little books, and it was a fantastic 2-day retreat because he skillfully allowed that, for each person, and you didn't have to share it with anyone if you didn't want to afterwards, but there was some sharing for those who wished to do that. And it really made it clear to each person in their own terms that these gates exist and the incredible fruit that was in there. And then a little bit, because of the way program organized it, you then are given a bit of you kind of are given a framework, not for the ultimate meaning, but kind of why these memories are linked maybe, so the question.
You have a way to explore it.
Yeah, it gives you this just simple structure, and that's all I ever did. I never went forward with that. But
well, we have this method in our own tradition, at least in Buddhism, in Tibetan dream yoga, and doing the chant, may I awaken within this dream, and grasp the fact that I am dreaming, so that all dreamlike beings may likewise awaken from nightmare, illusory suffering and confusion. You do that during the day to provoke this kind of lucidity of a liminal state at night, and you really get a lot, and then you can journal at night. But for all of those of us who don't sleep well, that's what you do when you wake up.
So you use
But you do the chant during the day.
Paul's life is our dream
All day.
matrix.
All day.
Because you are dreaming,
Yes.
you're under this cover of a vidya all day reacting.
Yeah.
So
Right.
you keep asking to wake up all day.
All our
And the more you do
sessions
it.
are started
Yeah, yeah.
with dream matrix, or whatever you want to say. We convene, it's a convening technique. It's Karen, his wife, does it. She's an expert. And it was explosive when we started. I had an experience, I think. I really trust you, Karen. This is what you do well. So we sat there in silence, and then people start speaking. There's no instruction at all. If they want to talk about a dream, they do, and there's no comment. And they will just, it's the night before they were talking. Well, the first time, somebody screamed and ran out the door.
Wow.
And hid in the women's dorm. So, and was enraged. You didn't tell me that people were going to come into my inner self. I said, you didn't have to speak. And I'm not going to listen to that. That's not what we're, she's actually in priest training now, but anyhow, that's one place. We do it. It lasts, what, 45 minutes? It's very fast. And there's absolutely no comment.
People
The other thing,
speak their dreams.
we do the dream inverse because we give the dream the reality credence and the life the illusory aspect. So that is a read the thought. It's very powerful, but to
Can you
find,
say a little more about that?
well,
Say that
it's
again.
the true man of no rank is paired in the dream in a way that's not in our daily consciousness. So it's, I know what happens because I study dream mode because for 40, I mean, if you're an analyst and you're a dreaming analyst, you dream all the time. But it's clear that there's a superior intelligence that knows everything that's happening and everything you've been through and has appropriate symbols for that are not impossible to decipher. So that is, if you want to say it's the wisdom body of the Alaya or beyond the Alaya. So with just a minimum of training, if people are willing, they can listen to that and then look back at more easily their ego consciousness and the terrible constriction and the solidification of roles and ideas. So that's the way actually we do it.
Yeah, and I really love the dream yoga because when I came to it, it was, well, how many hours a day are the knees going to sustain zazen? But I'm going to be laying on my back sleeping, and if I can practice in my sleep, how good is that? It does disturb your sleep a little. I got to warn you on that one. But it's a very rich way to access. And I'd have meetings with teachers who would tell me things in my dreams.
Yeah, that'll happen too.
Yeah.
The
And
Tibetans are
kind
pretty
of-
good about
it's like
that
it's
too.
realm, yeah.
Although I think they overdo precognitive functioning. Well, after the Chinese took over, they dropped a lot of Bon religion, magical processes.
I want to
Divination.
go back to your contracting the ideal to submerging the individual remark, because I think in some ways when we take on a model whole hog, for example from Japan, this is what we should do, in a certain way we're taking on the neurotic defense mechanisms of our ancestors. I mean, we're taking on the good ones too, but we're also taking on the neurotic. I will not be vulnerable. I will not have feelings. I'm going to make all that go away.
No baby can look at my face and grow.
Yeah, yeah, and so I think this adherence to a model like that comes without questioning or without development within a community, because each community should develop their model that suits their age, their involvement, and so on. So when we take on that model whole hog,
Well, we're making the impermanent permanent.
yeah,
Clearly we are.
and we're using this kind of contracting to an ideal which has been used as a defense mechanism.
It's used throughout history.
Yeah.
Making the organization more important than the people.
Yes.
Sure.
Cult. That's how you define cult.
That's right.
It's also a corporation or something. Sure, right.
Well, corporations use these techniques. Yeah, well, you don't matter. You're just a cog in how the corporation continues and profits.
That's why a corporation is a person.
If they have a logo or something. Yeah.
Thus I have heard.
So it's important for us to relate this to how we develop practice in whatever setting we're in, and how we do not inflict our own issues as a practice mechanism.
I can see my tendency as an individual to want to impose my sense of organization and rectitude on people, and so it's easy, and then that can become institutionalized.
Yeah, any of us can do it. Teachers in the most dangerous position to do it, but anyone can do it. We have a certain person, watching the Zendo, it can come out, or in the kitchen, or, doing the job assignments. That person's neurotic patterns come out as rules for the institution.
And rulemaking for yourself.
Well, that's where it comes from.
Yeah.
Can I go back a little bit to ask you a practical question?
Sure.
The example you gave us about Tom Stroke and that person's way they related to Tom is very poignant to me. But I wanted to see if maybe you could explain to us how you would diagnose that interaction using the wheel.
Religious inflation, the positive background. And an animalistic silverback ape desire for dominance. It was in a woman, but same thing.
So where's that on the wheel?
The animal realm is underneath the human realm. On the right side, it's from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock. No, yes, huh? It goes human, animal, hell, and hungry ghost.
So here we had an animal disguising animal instincts as a religious inflation.
Using the teachings as a way of being contracted.
Yeah, I call
And
that
therefore-
weaponizing the Dharma.
Yeah, all right. Weaponizing the- It's also grasping and cutting off. There's a cutting off of art, and there's a cutting off of knowing the situation, and a grasping. This is the real fruit of Buddhism.
Right.
Eat.
Well, that's how we
Yeah.
weaponize Dharma. This is right and you're wrong.
Well, yeah. So, okay. Well, for tomorrow is our last day, right?
Right. Last day.
Okay, so what I'd like you to do, and you can do anything you want, of course, but just if you want a little suggestion, pick a realm and pick a link. They're all named on my running wheel. Or take one of the questions, if you'd like a question, make one your own. Also, somebody wants to take on Yama, the whole negative force field. We're dealing with, why do they call them blue fields? Actually, Buddhism is based on what's called now field theory. All our science is field theory. We've gotten beyond single vectors, bunches of particles. We've even gotten beyond waves.
So it's the interaction within a field and
Yeah. So the field of Yama is what this this globe, this existence is structured, it's situated within his. So where do you feel the pain of the claws? And where do you feel in the mouth? You know, the whole mythology system, the hero is the one that can actually go in the mouth of the dragon and not get chomped.
Right.
So we've talked a lot about not withdrawing, not idealizing, not stepping out of the dragon's mouth, because everyone or stopping out of all those kind of wrong-headed things. So if anyone wants to take pranayama, that would be great. The unconditioned, I don't think we'll do it.
What represents the unconditioned?
The 5 Buddha fields outside, they're in space. But the whole thing of, the whole language and practices around spaciousness and space, Abhidharma being basically organized in conditioned and unconditioned.
So the 5 Buddha families, the different colors, do we have a
That's unclear to me doing my research whether it's a pre-lineage to the 5 Buddha families.
I didn't say so.
Or
Because
whether,
it's the colors.
yeah, in that sense. I don't know at this point. That's one thing I haven't.
In the guest house, was for some of you go in the guest house, it's James Schneider's 5 Buddha families painting. Okay. Where you are.
Goody.
Yeah, that is her visual representation of 5 Buddha families.
Could you elaborate on the 5 Buddha families?
Yeah, the Tibetans have gone into great detail on the 5 Buddha families, and I'm sure I can go to Google and type in 5 Buddha families, and we're going to come out with what color represents what aspect and what Buddha that is.
But you can also do it from inner research out.
Not just Google. Oh, God.
Or you can do your
Maybe there's an inner Google.
They
They
could do
could
it
do
inner
inner
Google.
Google.
It has to do
Inner Google.
It has to do with the presence of the unconditioned being felt or found within the work of prajna in every conditioned situation, thing, element, realm. So I tend to teach go from the inside out,
But this whole wheel.
yeah, the whole wheel is very particular in that sense.
But the whole wheel really reflects that internal process.
It does.
Yeah, I mean,
It
it must
isn't real
have come
without
from somebody who actually had experienced that.
Came from Buddha.
Yeah.
It is attributed to Buddha.
He didn't want pictorial depictions, he didn't want sculpture as was the practice of the time for 150 years. He said, this is my portrait. So I think, okay, we will continue Buddha's work and we will make constantly self-portraiture out of it.
Google tells you that this came from the Buddha.
Pardon?
Google does.
Good.
Good.
Can I ask, can we go back for a minute to the question of the sense of the community? I mean, I don't know if anybody else is doing that. I'm thinking about my community.
Yeah.
So, in a positive situation, if someone in the group had some idea or some creative move, the leader wouldn't just say, no, it's got to be my way, or,
Well, not me.
But they also would be able to discern whether it was a good idea or not somehow.
Yeah.
Where it was coming
Where
from.
it's coming from.
In
And
other words,
so-
is it coming from a creative way of uncovering ignorance, or is it coming from your defense, like the statement, oh, isn't this great? Let's work on how the stroke was so great. Let's everybody work on how their illness is so great for them.
Yeah, right.
That's coming from the
Yeah.
defensive
Yeah.
place.
So
So a
there has to
teacher
be-
ought to
So
know
the
that.
teacher, so in a sense, in some sense,
I still-
it's devolving back to the teacher to make the final call, if it needs to be a call. But there could just be, a person could say something and everybody could just, yeah.
Well,
that's a
let's
really
just
good
say
idea.
the teacher should be consulting with members of the
Yeah.
community about because they're going to be blind spots there. In my view, then the teacher should say, well, what do you think of this?
I've had more people hate me than I have distrust my judgment.
You want to say more about that?
Well, I had to learn. I had to learn that hate was another dharma, and it is connected to love, either the hungry ghost love or an overuse of love or different conflicts about that. And I had a brutalizing home life. My father tried to kill me several times, and I had to leave, and I was protecting my mother at 15. So I have a particular visceral response of collapse. I don't have a warrior thing. I have I can be gotten. I mean, when I started, I can be gotten very easily. And also being a woman.
So you
But
just
there-
built something piece by piece?
Well, I was told. I was told by teachers that you're going to have to change that, which was hard for me because I was a great mother type. Come here with all your suffering and support oriented. You were the true Buddha. I mean, had that. But a lot of that prevented me. This was too locked in and it was too historically bound. There was a total depression within my family. So I had to actually step away from there. I had to do an attrition of my best things were suddenly not idealized. And I had to learn from the trenches up. I had to learn that it was what going into an abyss was, really, in terms of that. And where I was presenting vulnerability now as a positive thing out of the generosity of feminine, or they don't have that sense of always being on top, or just largesse. I had to see where somebody was acting out and reinforcing their own suffering by letting me have it. But what's happened is that people don't leave our Sangha in that sense. The haters got used to punching at me and then they were stuck because I matured. and then every blow or every attempt to disavow or come out, I got better at reading it and I stood. So, has anyone ever read in Child Development Winnicott on the Place of Hate? Yeah, it's terrific. If you're interested in things in yourself coming in as teachers.
I want to talk about something that Lori said, because I think it's a really important, really important point. What you said was, so you had to build a kind of a self. And I would say, I know you answered it very well, but I would also say that the idea that there was nothing there and one had to build a scaffolding, I'm not sure if that's what you were saying, but I want to articulate that what was there was sucking energy into specific patterns that were not an appropriate response.
Yeah.
So deconstructing the scaffolding all the time.
Well,
yes,
natural
that
scaffolding.
internal stuff that was taking the energy and not able to meet or was provoking the attacks needed to be dealt with. Not a building of a false self around it, but a deconstruction or first a recognition of where all that energy was tied up and bound.
Right.
And it was tied up and bound in, I have to be this way or nobody will love me or they'll kill me or they'll hate me or whatever. So it was tied up there. And so finding that first, then an appropriate response can emerge. A free response that's appropriate to the situation. So you don't have to build the ferocious self, as I tell my students. Don't try to be like me. There's barely enough room in the world for one of us. Just do your thing. Find out what what binds you.
Grow what grows from your seed.
Yeah, but find out what's binding it first. What's binding it?
Well, we should say that everything on the wheel is redeemable and transformation fodder. So this wheel goes from bound and negative to positive. So, for instance, my attachment to non-being, in a way, or might be placed in situations of non-being, became a skill of working within non-being. So you see, greed can become generosity. It can also be neutral, non-greed. It also can be answering our own needs, which I think are a lot dismissed or down on the institution life. So that is, pardon? Shakyamuni called it annihilation fantasy. It was, when he was talking about the middle way, he said there are two fantasy systems in humans that are primary. One is eternalism, the other is annihilation.
Not
So
speaking up is attachment to non-being.
Yeah.
Not speaking up.
Okay.
That's
I
an
was-
attachment.
I was a great listener
I get it,
and
yeah.
said, if I speak, of course I was trained to not speak, I didn't realize that. If I speak, I won't be able to hear anyone else. And I thought, that makes sense.
Yeah, I didn't get, after you pick around, what were the two questions, they went by kind of fast? What were the two things you said to write on? Or?
Pick a realm and a link.
Yeah.
And you would do a personal portrait,
Oh,
basically. And you could first do the personal portrait of the link. Stay with the link. The one thing that's hard is to not just dissipate all over the place at this point. Interpenetration seen into which we all have complete capacity to do that. But yeah, you do it and then you say, how has this link worked to create me? I mean, it's arising, it's creation itself. How has it worked and what are my preferences around that? What is my sense of self around that? What's the history of, and then the linkings together, these are links, right? They're separate, whole separate worlds. They work as separate and they also work as a system of linkage. Eventually, interpenetration, you don't have causal one step, when causal other. You don't have 12. You would have, like 50 aspects. But we're completely have capacity to do that, of course.
I think that for those of you who've done SPOT and know this system, we did this graphic representation of the internal family system. This is another, internal family system is a modern day way of talking about all of these hidden conversations and forces that are going on. So we just refer back to some of those characters that came up and what they do in here.
Diane,
yeah.
I know that we're going to end probably pretty soon. You're going to work with us tomorrow, and I've been introduced to this information, but I'm interested in really looking at it more closely. Are you going to have bibliographies, or is there something, a resource that would be helpful to dig into? Because I'm going to have a lot of notes in here, and I may not remember what they mean.
Well, okay, I would suggest you call me if you want.
Okay.
Anyway, here, just call me. The number, Carol's my assistant, she will answer Uber's and Center. It's 847-475-3264. The trouble is the Tibetan, I consider the Tibetan material co-opted and unusable. And very sort of CJ run in certain, the linkage system. You can go to Google, but I don't like anything on Google. It doesn't.
And you're writing a book on this.
I actually just got a grant last week. I'm very happy with to finish this book. I wrote it 20 years
on this?
Yeah. 20 years ago I finished the whole thing and I put a briefcase in the car and someone in Diane, Chicago, which I shouldn't have left there, they broke the wheel and they took it.
Oh.
That was my only. But I made use of that because I said, you're not mature enough to put this on. And just start all over again. Don't try to like reproduce a little bitty piece and everything. So I just started all over again.
And the way you learned it is kind of like inner wisdom?
No, I first learned it from, as in a kind of more didactic way, from a PhD candidate at University of Wisconsin, Deer Park, who was at the San Francisco Zen Center when I started practicing in the late 60s. That's when I bought the wheel and nets. And I had tutorials with him. And it was somewhat frowned on by my teachers at the time. They said, well, the Tibetans have that and that's not very important anyhow. And I said, well, they say that this is how Buddhism was taught in the beginning. Oh, well. So, we're Zen. I mean, you get that.
But your model is very infused with psychology, particularly Jungian psychology.
The primacy of the image under the word, yes. And the fact that it was chosen by Buddha to give an humanistic teaching map of the organization of interpenetrating teachings. One kind of game is to find out all the teachings that came out later in formal written form and sutras and things. Find out the koan places that you can relate to. So that's an individual way to work with. There's the portraiture, the self, and all the parts. Then when you start, it's fun when you start putting them together. But your own personal koans will come out of getting this and different. I would be happy to spend time with all of you. I work over the phone about 45 minutes. And yeah.
You have some amount of domination.
People can, everything is sliding scale with or free. I mean, it's, people decide what they want to do. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
About 25 years ago, I became interested in the wheel of life, and I gave a very superficial talk about it, but one of the things, it's very difficult to find that information anywhere.
No, it's a desert. And that's one thing that's one thing I learned about courage. Is at first I gobbled that up. Nothing here. No, thanks be to the well image. No water at the well. Better leave. You know. And then I thought, this is. You could actually stick with this. So I have from childhood on some excellent concentration skills, and one of it is staring at Puget Sound for 20-some years. The other is staring at Mount Rainier, which was about this big in our picture window. The other is staring at trees and ground, and the other is spontaneously God gave me. So I went to the illness, but I was left alone. I was an only child, and rather than being lonely, I had a different perspective. And also, there's something, if you can stand it, there's something fortunate about not being totally gratified by your family. Because you can't go there and stay there. And I also developed an intense interest, an absolute desire for finding a religion. That one that was suffering as primary, it was for universal beings. I didn't like Christianity. When they told me about all the violence, and then I snooped around and found more, I couldn't do it at all. And then I thought, why are all these religions fighting, and they all have a special pipeline to the infinite, and their guy is the only guy, and why are there no women ministers, and why isn't Mary somewhere, or Mary Magdalene in the Trinity, and all kinds of things. I was depressed.